Sarah Mitchell's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her brand-new nurse's cap in the hospital bathroom mirror. Today marked her third week at St. Mary's General Hospital in San Diego, and she still felt like she was drowning in the fast-paced world of emergency medicine. The white uniform felt foreign against her skin, and the weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. At 24, Sarah had dreamed of becoming a nurse since she was 8 years old, inspired by the kind woman who had cared for her dying grandmother. She had worked 3 jobs to pay for nursing school, studying late into the night while her classmates partied. Now, standing in the sterile hospital bathroom, she wondered if she was truly ready for what lay ahead. The emergency department buzzed with its usual controlled chaos. Ambulances arrived every few minutes, their sirens wailing as they rushed through the automatic doors. Doctors shouted orders across the room, while nurses moved with practiced efficiency between patients. Sarah tried to blend into the background, following the more experienced nurses and learning from their every move. "Mitchell," called out Dr. Patricia Hernandez, the head of emergency medicine. "Room 7 needs vitals checked." The patient came in complaining of chest pains. Sarah nodded quickly and gathered her equipment. Room 7 was one of the smaller trauma bays, usually reserved for less critical cases. She knocked gently on the door before entering, her clipboard clutched tightly in her hands. The man lying on the hospital bed immediately caught her attention. He was probably in his late 40s, with graying hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. Despite being dressed in a simple hospital gown, there was something commanding about his presence. His posture, even while lying down, suggested military training. Small scars marked his hands and arms, telling stories of a life lived dangerously. "Good morning, sir," Sarah said softly, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "I'm Nurse Mitchell. I need to check your vital signs." The man nodded curtly. "Admiral James Richardson," he said simply, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. An admiral? She had served military families before during her clinical rotations, but never someone of such high rank. She tried to maintain her professionalism as she wrapped the blood pressure cuff around his arm. "What brings you in today, Admiral Richardson?" she asked, pumping the cuff and watching the numbers on her digital monitor. "Chest pain started about an hour ago," he replied, his voice steady despite the obvious discomfort. "Felt like someone was squeezing my heart with a vice." Sarah frowned as she watched the blood pressure reading. 180 over 110. That was dangerously high. His pulse was irregular too, jumping between 45 and 95 beats per minute. She checked the reading again, thinking her equipment might be malfunctioning. "Admiral, have you experienced anything like this before?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm while her mind raced through the possibilities. "Never," he said firmly. "I've been in combat zones for 30 years. Been shot, blown up, and survived things that would kill most men. This is different." Sarah attached the heart monitor leads to his chest, and what she saw made her blood run cold. The rhythm was erratic, showing dangerous irregularities that could indicate a massive heart attack. But there was something else, something that didn't fit the normal pattern of cardiac distress. As she studied the monitor, Admiral Richardson suddenly grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. His grip was firm but not painful, and his eyes locked onto hers with intense focus. "Nurse," he whispered urgently, "I need you to listen very carefully. I think someone is trying to kill me." Sarah's first instinct was to dismiss his words as the paranoid rambling of a man in medical distress. Patients often said strange things when they were scared or in pain. But something in his eyes told her this was different. This man had seen real danger, real threats. He knew the difference between medical emergency and something more sinister. "What do you mean, sir?" she asked quietly, glancing toward the door to make sure they weren't overheard. 3 days ago, I was briefed on a classified operation involving weapons trafficking in Southeast Asia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The intelligence pointed to corruption at the highest levels of military command. People with the power to make problems disappear. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. This was way beyond anything she had been trained for in nursing school. She was supposed to take vital signs and administer medication, not deal with military conspiracies and assassination attempts. "Admiral, I think we should focus on your medical condition right now," she said, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. But Richardson shook his head. The symptoms started right after I had coffee with General Morrison this morning. We've known each other for 20 years. I trusted him completely. His grip on her wrist tightened slightly. I think he poisoned me. The heart monitor suddenly began beeping more rapidly. Sarah looked at the screen and saw that his heart rate had spiked to 130 beats per minute, and the rhythm was becoming even more irregular. Whatever was happening to him was getting worse. I need to get the doctor, Sarah said, reaching for the call button. No, Richardson said firmly. Not yet. If I'm right about this, then whoever did this to me might have people watching. They could be anywhere in this hospital. Sarah's mind reeled. Was she really standing in a hospital room, listening to a Navy admiral tell her about a possible assassination attempt? 3 weeks ago, her biggest worry had been passing her nursing boards. Now she was potentially in the middle of some kind of military conspiracy. The monitor alarms grew louder, and Sarah knew she had to act. Whatever Richardson's suspicions, his medical condition was deteriorating rapidly. She had taken an oath to do no harm, and that meant saving his life regardless of the circumstances. Admiral, I believe what you're telling me, but you're having a medical emergency right now, she said firmly. I have to get help, or you could die. Richardson studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're right. But promise me something. If anything happens to me, if I don't make it through this, you need to contact Captain Michael Torres at Naval Special Operations Command. Tell him about the briefing, about General Morrison, about everything I've told you. Sarah nodded, though she hoped it wouldn't come to that. She pressed the emergency call button, and, within seconds, Dr. Hernandez burst through the door with 2 other nurses trailing behind her. What's the situation? Dr. Hernandez asked, immediately moving to check the monitors. Acute onset chest pain with severe cardiac arrhythmia, Sarah reported. Blood pressure 180/110, heart rate irregular between 45 and 130. Dr. Hernandez frowned as she studied the readouts. This is unusual. Get me a full cardiac panel and prepare for emergency intervention. This looks like it could be chemical-induced. Sarah's blood ran cold. Chemical-induced. That was medical terminology for poisoning. As the medical team worked around Admiral Richardson, Sarah stepped back against the wall, her mind racing. If what he had told her was true, then she was witnessing an assassination attempt on a high-ranking military officer. But what was she supposed to do about it? She was just a rookie nurse, barely 3 weeks into her first job. The next hour passed in a blur of medical procedures. Blood was drawn for toxicology screening, medications were administered to stabilize his heart rhythm, and specialists were called in for consultation. Through it all, Admiral Richardson remained conscious but weak, his eyes occasionally finding Sarah's across the crowded room. Dr. Hernandez pulled Sarah aside during a brief lull in the activity. Good catch on the irregular readings, she said quietly. If you hadn't acted quickly, we might have lost him. The blood work is showing elevated levels of several compounds that shouldn't be there. Compounds? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Possible poisoning, Dr. Hernandez confirmed. We're running more specific tests, but the preliminary results suggest someone deliberately tried to harm this patient. Sarah felt like the floor was dropping out from beneath her feet. Admiral Richardson had been right. Someone had actually tried to kill him, and now she was the only person who knew about his suspicions regarding General Morrison and the classified briefing. As the afternoon wore on, Admiral Richardson's condition stabilized somewhat. The medical team had managed to flush most of the toxins from his system and regulate his heart rhythm. He was moved to a private room in the intensive care unit, where he could be monitored closely. Sarah found herself assigned to his care, partly because she had been the first to assess him and partly because he had specifically requested her. As she checked his 4 lines and monitored his progress, they spoke in hushed tones about what had happened. The blood work confirmed it, she told him quietly. Someone definitely poisoned you. Richardson nodded grimly. I figured as much. The question now is what we do about it. We should call the police, Sarah suggested, though even as she said it, she realized how complicated that might be. This goes beyond local law enforcement, Richardson replied. The people involved in this have connections everywhere. We need to be very careful about who we trust. Through the window of his room, Sarah could see the parking lot below. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, just the usual mix of cars, visitors, and hospital staff going about their business. But Richardson's paranoia was starting to affect her. Were they really safe here? Could the people who had tried to kill him track him to the hospital? As evening approached, Sarah's shift was supposed to end, but she found herself reluctant to leave. She had become invested in Admiral Richardson's survival, not just as his nurse, but as perhaps the only person who could help him expose whoever had tried to kill him. "You should go home," Richardson told her as she checked his vitals one more time. "You've done more than enough already." "I don't feel right leaving you alone," Sarah admitted. "What if they try again?" Richardson's expression softened slightly. "You're a good nurse, Sarah. Better than you know. But this isn't your fight." But as Sarah prepared to leave, she realized that it had become her fight the moment she had chosen to listen to him, to believe his story, and to act on it. She had saved his life once today. She wasn't about to abandon him now. As she walked toward the elevator, her mind was already working on a plan. She would contact Captain Torres, just as Richardson had asked. She would make sure the hospital security was aware of the potential threat. And she would be back first thing in the morning to continue his care. What Sarah didn't know was that her actions over the past several hours had already set a much larger chain of events in motion. Admiral Richardson's survival and the discovery of the poisoning had triggered protocols at the highest levels of military intelligence. And by tomorrow morning, St. Mary's General Hospital would become the center of a very dangerous game of cat and mouse. Sarah's apartment felt strangely empty that evening as she tried to process everything that had happened. She had called Captain Torres from her personal phone, her hands shaking as she dialed the number Admiral Richardson had given her. The conversation had been brief, but intense. "Ma'am, I need you to repeat exactly what Admiral Richardson told you," Captain Torres had said, his voice sharp with urgency. Sarah had recounted every detail she could remember about the classified briefing, General Morrison, and the suspected poisoning. There had been a long pause on the other end of the line before Torres spoke again. "Nurse Mitchell, you may have just prevented a major national security incident. I need you to trust me on something. Don't discuss this with anyone else, not even your supervisors at the hospital. We'll be taking steps to protect both you and the Admiral, but it's crucial that you act normally tomorrow." Sleep had been impossible. Sarah lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events over and over in her mind. 3 weeks ago, she had been worried about remembering proper medication dosages. Now she was apparently involved in a military conspiracy that reached the highest levels of command. She arrived at the hospital the next morning an hour before her shift started, unable to wait any longer to check on Admiral Richardson. The ICU was quieter than the emergency department, with only the soft beeping of monitors and the hushed conversations of the night shift nurses. Admiral Richardson was awake when she entered his room, sitting up slightly in bed and looking much better than he had the previous day. His color had returned, and the heart monitor showed a steady, normal rhythm. "You look like you didn't sleep much," he observed as she checked his 4 lines. "I called Captain Torres," Sarah said quietly, glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard. "He said to act normal today." Richardson nodded approvingly. "Good. Torres is one of the few people I trust completely. If anyone can get to the bottom of this, it's him." As Sarah went about her morning routine, checking vitals and administering medications, she tried to follow Torres's advice and act normally. But she found herself constantly watching the hallways, studying the faces of visitors and staff members, wondering if any of them might be connected to the people who had tried to kill Richardson. Around mid-morning, Dr. Hernandez stopped by to check on their patient. She was accompanied by 2 men in dark suits who introduced themselves as investigators from the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Sarah recognized one of them as Captain Torres from his voice, though seeing him in person was different than she had imagined. He was younger than she had expected, probably in his early 40s, with the kind of alert, watchful expression that suggested he missed very little. "Nurse Mitchell," Captain Torres said, "could we speak with you privately for a moment?" Sarah followed him and his partner to a small conference room down the hall. Torres closed the door and activated a small electronic device that he placed on the table. "That's a signal jammer," he explained. "It will prevent anyone from listening in on our conversation. Admiral Richardson told us about your quick thinking yesterday. You probably saved his life." "I was just doing my job," Sarah said, though she felt a surge of pride at the recognition. You did more than that, Torres's partner, who had introduced himself as Agent Davis, said. The blood work confirmed the presence of a rare neurotoxin. It's not the kind of thing you can buy at the local pharmacy. This was a sophisticated assassination attempt. Torres leaned forward. We need to ask you some questions about yesterday morning, before the Admiral arrived at the hospital. Did you notice anything unusual? Any new faces around the hospital? Anyone asking questions about staffing or procedures? Sarah thought carefully. There was a man in the lobby when I arrived for my shift. He was wearing a maintenance uniform, but something about him seemed off. He was paying too much attention to the security cameras and the staff movements. Agent Davis took notes as she spoke. Can you describe him? Average height, maybe 5'10". Dark hair, military-style haircut. He had a small scar on his left cheek, and his hands looked like he worked with them a lot. But not maintenance work, more like weapons or electronics. Torres and Davis exchanged glances. That's a very detailed observation, Torres said. Have you had training in surveillance detection? Sarah shook her head. No, I just noticed details. It's something my grandmother taught me when I was little. She always said that paying attention to people could keep you safe. Well, your grandmother was right, Torres said. We're going to have additional security in place today, but they'll be undercover. If you notice anything else unusual, anyone who doesn't belong or seems to be paying too much attention to Admiral Richardson's room, I want you to find a way to signal us immediately. They gave her a small device that looked like a pager. Press the button twice quickly if you see anything suspicious. Help will be there in seconds. As Sarah returned to the ICU, she felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders again. She was no longer just a nurse caring for a patient. She was part of a complex security operation designed to protect a high-ranking military officer from assassination. The morning passed quietly, but Sarah's trained eye began picking up details she might have missed before. There was a new janitor on the floor, one she hadn't seen during her 3 weeks at the hospital. He seemed to spend an unusual amount of time cleaning near the ICU entrance, and she noticed he kept glancing toward Admiral Richardson's room. There was also a woman in the waiting area who claimed to be visiting her sick mother, but Sarah had checked the patient roster, and there were no elderly female patients on the floor that day. The woman had been there for over 2 hours, occasionally getting up to walk past the nurse's station as if she were stretching her legs. Around noon, Sarah decided to test her suspicions. She approached the new janitor with a friendly smile. Hi there, I'm Sarah. I don't think we've met before. Are you new here? The man looked up from his mop with what seemed like genuine surprise. Oh, hi. Yeah, I just started this week. Transferred over from the downtown location. His explanation seemed plausible, but something in his eyes made Sarah uncomfortable. There was an alertness there that didn't match his casual demeanor. She made a mental note to check with the maintenance supervisor about recent transfers. The woman in the waiting area was more difficult to approach directly, but Sarah found an excuse to walk past her several times during the afternoon. Each time, she noticed the woman's attention seemed focused on the ICU rather than any particular patient room. She was also wearing shoes that looked more appropriate for running than for sitting in a hospital waiting room. As the afternoon shift began, Sarah was officially assigned to continue Admiral Richardson's care. She entered his room to find him looking restless and concerned. Something's wrong, he said quietly as she checked his monitors. I can feel it. There are too many people around who don't belong. Sarah glanced around the room, noting the positions of the various monitoring equipment and the clear sight lines to the door and window. I've noticed some things too, she admitted. Captain Torres gave me a way to signal if I see anything suspicious. Richardson nodded approvingly. Good. My instincts are telling me that whoever tried to kill me yesterday isn't going to give up easily. They know I survived, and they know I'm in a position to expose their operation. As if summoned by his words, a commotion erupted in the hallway outside. Sarah could hear raised voices and the sound of running footsteps. She moved to the window that looked out onto the corridor and saw several people in hospital scrubs moving quickly toward the ICU. But something was wrong with the picture. The people in scrubs were all walking with military precision, their movements coordinated in a way that suggested tactical training rather than medical emergency response. And none of them were carrying medical equipment. Sarah's hand went to the pager device Torres had given her, but before she could press the button, Admiral Richardson grabbed her arm. Wait, he whispered. We need to see who they really are first. The group of fake medical personnel stopped just outside Richardson's room, and Sarah could hear them speaking in low, urgent tones. One of them, a woman with short blonde hair, was apparently in charge. "The target is in room 314, she was saying. "Davis team takes the north corridor. Johnson team secures the south exit. We have a 5-minute window before hospital security realizes what's happening." Sarah's blood ran cold. These weren't Torres's people. They were here to finish what the poisoning had failed to accomplish. She pressed the pager button twice quickly, praying that help would arrive in time. Admiral Richardson was already moving, despite his weakened condition. Years of combat experience had kicked in, and he was assessing the room for defensive positions and potential weapons. The force stand could be used as a club, the monitor cables could potentially trip or bind an attacker, and the bathroom offered a temporary refuge with a door that could be locked. "How many?" Richardson whispered. Sarah peered carefully through the window. "I count 6, maybe more. They've split into teams." The sound of the door handle turning made them both freeze. Sarah positioned herself near the force stand while Richardson prepared to defend himself from the hospital bed. But instead of armed attackers, Captain Torres and 2 other agents burst through the door. "Admiral, we need to move now," Torres said urgently. "We've got hostile contacts in the building." "How did they find us so quickly?" Richardson asked as Torres helped him out of bed. "We're still working on that," Agent Davis said, appearing in the doorway. "But right now we need to focus on getting you to a secure location." Sarah found herself caught up in the rapid evacuation. Torres grabbed her arm as the team prepared to move. "You're coming with us," he said firmly. "You've seen too much, and you're too valuable as a witness. If we leave you here, you'll be in danger." The next few minutes were a blur of organized chaos. Torres's team had apparently prepared multiple evacuation routes, and they moved through the hospital using service corridors and maintenance areas that Sarah had never seen before. Admiral Richardson, despite his recent medical ordeal, moved with surprising agility and endurance. Behind them, Sarah could hear the sounds of pursuit, footsteps in the corridors, shouted commands, and what sounded like brief scuffles as hospital security encountered the fake medical team. They reached a service elevator that took them directly to the hospital's loading dock. Waiting there was an unmarked black SUV with heavily tinted windows and what appeared to be armor plating around the wheel wells. As they climbed into the vehicle, Sarah caught sight of the hospital's main entrance. Several more black SUVs had pulled up, and men in tactical gear were rapidly surrounding the building. But these vehicles had government license plates and official markings. "Backup?" she asked Torres. "Ours," he confirmed. "We called in a full tactical response as soon as your signal came through. Whoever sent that hit team just walked into a trap." As their SUV pulled away from the hospital, Sarah looked back to see the building being systematically secured by what appeared to be a small army of federal agents. She realized that Admiral Richardson's assassination attempt had triggered a massive counterintelligence operation. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Secure facility," Torres replied. "Somewhere we can debrief properly and figure out exactly how deep this conspiracy goes." Admiral Richardson leaned back in his seat, looking exhausted but determined. "It goes deeper than you think," he said quietly. "If General Morrison is involved, and if they were willing to attempt assassination in a public hospital, then we're dealing with something much bigger than simple corruption." Sarah's mind reeled as she tried to process the implications. She had gone from rookie nurse to key witness in what appeared to be a major military conspiracy, all in the space of 2 days. And, based on the grim expressions on the faces around her, she suspected that the most dangerous part was still ahead of them. The secure facility turned out to be a nondescript office building about 30 miles outside San Diego. From the outside, it looked like any corporate headquarters, complete with a landscaped parking lot and a sign reading Pacific Consulting Group. But Sarah quickly realized that the building's innocent appearance was carefully constructed camouflage. The elevators required special key cards to operate. There were multiple security checkpoints staffed by armed guards, and the windows were all tinted so heavily that no one could see inside. Captain Torres led them through a maze of corridors to a conference room that looked like something from a spy movie, complete with multiple computer screens and communication equipment. "Welcome to one of our West Coast intelligence analysis centers," Torres said as they settled around a large table. Everything we discuss here is classified at the highest levels. Admiral Richardson, now wearing civilian clothes provided by Torres's team, looked much more like his old self despite the ordeal of the past 2 days. The medical staff at the facility had given him a clean bill of health, confirming that the toxins were completely cleared from his system. Before we go any further, Richardson said, looking directly at Sarah, I need you to understand what you're getting into. Once you hear the full scope of this operation, there's no going back to your normal life. You'll be under protective custody until this is resolved, and, depending on how it plays out, that could be months or even years. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. 2 days ago, her biggest worry had been impressing her supervisors and learning hospital procedures. Now she was apparently being asked to give up her entire life to help expose a military conspiracy. What exactly are we dealing with? She asked. Torres activated one of the large screens, which displayed a complex organizational chart showing military units, defense contractors, and government agencies connected by a web of lines and arrows. What Admiral Richardson stumbled onto is a network of corrupt officials selling classified military technology to hostile foreign governments, Torres explained. We're talking about advanced weapons systems, communications encryption, satellite intelligence, the kind of information that could compromise national security for decades. The briefing I received 3 days ago was about weapons trafficking in Southeast Asia, Richardson added. But it wasn't just small arms or conventional weapons. The intelligence indicated that someone was selling access to our most advanced naval technology, including submarine detection systems and missile guidance computers. Sarah studied the chart on the screen. And you think General Morrison is involved? We know he is, Torres said grimly. The assassination attempt confirmed it. Morrison has been under investigation for 6 months, but we needed direct evidence of his involvement. Admiral Richardson's scheduled briefing would have given him access to information that could have blown the entire operation wide open. Agent Davis, who had been quietly working at a computer terminal, looked up from his screen. We just got the preliminary report from the hospital operation. We captured 5 members of the hit team, but they're all low-level contractors. Professional killers for hire, not the people actually running the show. What about the 6th person? Sarah asked, remembering her count from the hospital. Still missing, Davis admitted. Probably the team leader. She managed to slip away during the confusion. Torres brought up another screen showing surveillance footage from the hospital. Sarah watched herself moving through the corridors, checking on Admiral Richardson, and talking to the suspicious janitor and waiting room visitor. Your observations were spot on, Torres said. The janitor was definitely part of the surveillance team, and the woman in the waiting room was their spotter. You have excellent instincts for this kind of work. I just pay attention, Sarah said, though she felt a flush of pride at the professional recognition. Richardson leaned forward. The question now is how we proceed. Morrison knows that I survived and that his operation has been compromised. He'll either try to run or he'll escalate his efforts to eliminate anyone who can expose him. Actually, we have a proposal, Torres said. Admiral Richardson is officially dead. Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. What do you mean? As far as the official record is concerned, Admiral James Richardson died at St. Mary's Hospital yesterday evening from complications related to acute poisoning, Davis explained. His death has been reported to the Navy Department, and his family has been notified of his classified status. But that's not true, Sarah protested. No, it's not, Richardson said calmly. But it gives us several advantages. First, it makes Morrison and his conspirators think they succeeded, which might make them careless. Second, it allows me to operate without the constraints of my official position. And third, it protects my family from retaliation. Torres activated another screen showing what appeared to be a detailed operation plan. We want to use Admiral Richardson as an undercover asset to gather evidence against Morrison and the rest of the network. But we need someone on the inside who can help coordinate communications and provide support. Sarah had a sinking feeling she knew where this was going. You want me to go back to the hospital? Not exactly, Torres said. We want you to accept a transfer to the Naval Medical Center. Morrison's network includes people at several military medical facilities, and we need someone who can move freely in that environment without arousing suspicion. But I'm just a nurse, Sarah protested. I don't have any training for this kind of work. You have something better than training, Richardson said. You have instincts, and you have credibility. Medical personnel are trusted in ways that intelligence officers never are. You can go places and ask questions that would be impossible for any of us. Agent Davis pulled up personnel files on his computer. We've already arranged for your transfer to be processed through normal channels. As far as anyone knows, you requested the position because you wanted to specialize in military medicine. Your supervisor at St. Mary's has been told that you're taking an opportunity for advanced training. Sarah stared at the files, seeing official paperwork that would completely change the direction of her life. What about my apartment, my personal life? All taken care of, Torres said. You'll maintain your cover identity, but you'll have a new apartment near the naval base and a complete backstory to support your transfer. To the outside world, you're exactly what you appear to be, a dedicated nurse who wants to serve military families. The weight of the decision pressed down on Sarah like a physical force. She thought about her quiet life, her plans to build a career in civilian nursing, her dreams of eventually working in pediatrics or family medicine. All of that would be gone, replaced by a dangerous double life that could get her killed. But she also thought about Admiral Richardson lying in that hospital bed, trusting her with his life and his secrets. She thought about the professional killers who had tried to murder him in a place that was supposed to be safe and healing. And she thought about the implications of military technology being sold to hostile foreign governments. If I do this, she said slowly, how long would it last? Until we can gather enough evidence to prosecute Morrison and dismantle his entire network, Torres replied. Could be weeks, could be months. There's no way to know for certain. Richardson reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. Sarah, I won't lie to you about the risks. These people have already proven they're willing to kill to protect their operation. If you're discovered, your life will be in immediate danger. But, he continued, you have the chance to prevent military technology from falling into the wrong hands. The weapons and intelligence systems they're selling could be used to kill American soldiers, sailors, and Marines. Your work could save hundreds, maybe thousands of lives. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to imagine herself in the role they were describing. Moving through military medical facilities, watching for suspicious activities, reporting back to Torres's team while maintaining her cover as a simple nurse. It was terrifying and exciting at the same time. When she opened her eyes, she found 3 pairs of eyes watching her intently, waiting for her decision. She thought about the oath she had taken when she became a nurse, to do no harm and to protect those in her care. In a way, this was just an extension of that oath on a much larger scale. I'll do it, she said quietly. Torres nodded approvingly. Good. We'll start your preparation immediately. The next several hours were a whirlwind of briefings, training sessions, and preparation. Sarah learned about surveillance techniques, communication protocols, and how to recognize the signs of suspicious activity. She was fitted with nearly invisible communication devices and given emergency procedures to follow if her cover was blown. Most importantly, she learned about the scope of Morrison's network. The corruption reached into multiple branches of the military, several defense contractors, and even some civilian government agencies. The people involved had access to some of the nation's most closely guarded secrets, and they had been systematically selling that information for years. The amount of money involved is staggering, Agent Davis explained during one of the briefings. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in illegal transactions. But more than that, we're talking about strategic military advantages being handed over to countries that are actively working against American interests. As evening approached, Sarah found herself alone with Admiral Richardson in one of the facility's break rooms. He was drinking coffee and staring out the window at the parking lot below. Having second thoughts? He asked without looking at her. Every few minutes, Sarah admitted. This morning, I was a nurse worried about medication schedules. Tonight, I'm apparently a spy tasked with helping to bring down a major military conspiracy. Richardson turned to face her. You know, in 30 years of military service, I've worked with some incredibly brave and dedicated people. Intelligence officers who risked their lives behind enemy lines, special operations soldiers who carried out impossible missions, analysts who spent years patiently gathering crucial information. He paused, studying her face. But I've rarely met anyone who impressed me as much as you have in the past 2 days. You made a split-second decision to trust a stranger's story about an assassination plot. You acted on incomplete information to save my life. And now you're willing to risk everything to help protect national security. Sarah felt tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. I'm scared, she admitted. Good, Richardson said firmly. Fear keeps you alive in this business. The moment you stop being scared is the moment you start making fatal mistakes. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, a simple silver pin in the shape of an anchor. This was my father's, he said. He was a Navy corpsman in World War II. Saved dozens of lives in the Pacific Theater. He always told me that true courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what's right despite being afraid. Richardson pinned the anchor to Sarah's jacket. You're about to embark on one of the most dangerous missions I've ever been associated with. But I can't think of anyone I'd rather have watching my back. As Sarah looked down at the small silver anchor, she felt something shift inside her. The fear was still there, but it was joined by a sense of purpose and determination that she had never experienced before. She was no longer just Sarah Mitchell, rookie nurse. She was now a key player in an operation that could affect national security. Torres appeared in the doorway. It's time, he said. Your new identity is ready, your transfer orders are processed, and your apartment is prepared. Tomorrow morning, you start work at the Naval Medical Center as Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, Navy Nurse Corps. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the silver anchor against her chest. Lieutenant Mitchell, she repeated, testing how the words felt. I think I can get used to that. As she prepared to leave the facility and begin her new life, Sarah realized that she was no longer the uncertain young woman who had looked at herself in the hospital bathroom mirror just 2 days ago. That person had been transformed by events beyond her control into someone stronger, more focused, and more dangerous than she had ever imagined possible. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell's first day at the Naval Medical Center felt surreal. Walking through the corridors in her crisp Navy uniform, she couldn't help but marvel at how much her life had changed in just 1 week. The confident stride she had developed during her intensive training felt natural now, as if she had been born to this role. The medical center was massive compared to St. Mary's, with multiple buildings spread across the naval base. Her cover assignment was in the trauma surgery unit, where her civilian emergency room experience made her a valuable addition to the team. But her real mission was to observe and report on any unusual activities that might be connected to Morrison's network. Captain Elena Vasquez, the head of nursing, welcomed Sarah during her orientation briefing. We're glad to have someone with your emergency medicine background, she said, reviewing Sarah's carefully constructed personnel file. The trauma unit has been understaffed, and we've been seeing an increase in complex cases lately. Sarah nodded professionally, though she couldn't help but wonder if some of those complex cases might be related to the conspiracy she was investigating. Torres had briefed her on several suspicious incidents at military medical facilities over the past year. Unusual injuries that might have been the result of interrogations or eliminations, patients who had disappeared from records, and medical supplies that had been diverted to unknown destinations. Her assigned supervisor was Commander Robert Chun, a seasoned Navy doctor who had served multiple deployments in combat zones. He struck Sarah as honest and dedicated, but Torres had warned her that the corruption network included people at all levels of military medicine. Your first assignment will be working with our Special Patients Unit, Commander Chun explained as he gave her a tour of the facility. We handle cases that require discretion, high-ranking officers, intelligence personnel, anyone whose medical treatment might have security implications. Sarah's pulse quickened. The Special Patients Unit was exactly where Morrison's network would have the most influence. If classified information was being extracted from wounded or hospitalized military personnel, it would likely happen in a unit like this one. The unit itself was located in a separate wing of the hospital, accessible only through security checkpoints that required special clearance. Sarah's new identity included the necessary access codes, but she knew that using them would create electronic records that could potentially expose her if anyone became suspicious. Her first patient assignment was a Marine colonel who had been injured in what the records described as a training accident. But when Sarah reviewed his chart, she noticed inconsistencies that didn't match the official story. The pattern of injuries suggested he had been tortured rather than accidentally hurt during training exercises. Colonel Martinez was brought in 3 days ago, explained Lieutenant Commander Patricia Webb, the nurse Sarah was replacing. Severe trauma to multiple areas, but he's been unresponsive since his arrival. The doctors think it might be psychological rather than physical. Sarah studied the unconscious man in the hospital bed. Colonel Martinez was probably in his late 40s, with the weathered appearance of someone who had seen extensive combat. But there was something about his injuries that bothered her. They were too precise, too methodical to be accidental. As she worked through her first shift, Sarah began to notice patterns that troubled her. Several patients in the special unit had similar mysterious injuries. The medical staff seemed unusually reluctant to discuss their cases in detail. And there were frequent visits from people in civilian clothes who claimed to be from various government agencies. During her lunch break, Sarah found a secure location to contact Torres using the encrypted communication device hidden in her medical equipment. The conversation was brief, but troubling. "We've identified 3 more facilities where similar patterns are occurring," Torres reported. Morrison's network appears to be using military medical centers to interrogate and eliminate people who pose threats to their operation. "Are they killing patients?" Sarah asked, horrified by the implication. "Sometimes. But more often, they're extracting information and then arranging for the patients to have complications that prevent them from talking. We think Colonel Martinez might have discovered something about the weapons trafficking operation." Sarah felt sick as she thought about the unconscious Marine in her care. "Is there anything I can do to help him?" "Keep him alive," Torres said firmly. "And watch for anyone who shows unusual interest in his case. We're working on a way to safely extract him, but it's going to take time." That afternoon, Sarah's suspicions were confirmed when a man in an expensive suit arrived to visit Colonel Martinez. He introduced himself to the nursing staff as Dr. Harrison from the Defense Intelligence Agency, but something about his demeanor didn't match his credentials. Sarah watched from a distance as Dr. Harrison spent nearly an hour in Martinez's room. Through the window, she could see him attaching some kind of device to the patient's foreline. When he emerged, he spoke briefly with Commander Chun before leaving the unit. 15 minutes later, the monitors in Colonel Martinez's room began showing signs of distress. Sarah rushed in to find the patient in obvious pain, though still unconscious. His heart rate had spiked, and his blood pressure was dropping rapidly. "Get Dr. Chun," Sarah called to another nurse, but her instincts told her that calling the commander might be a mistake. If Chun was involved in the conspiracy, he might prevent her from saving Martinez's life. Instead, Sarah quickly disconnected the 4-line that Dr. Harrison had tampered with and replaced it with a fresh bag of saline. She also administered a dose of naloxone, suspecting that the patient had been given an opiate overdose designed to appear like a natural complication. Colonel Martinez's vital signs began to stabilize almost immediately. Sarah carefully preserved the tampered 4-bag as evidence, hiding it in a medical waste container where Torres's team could retrieve it later. When Commander Chin arrived, Sarah reported that the patient had experienced a brief episode of distress, but had responded well to standard treatment. Chin seemed surprised that Martinez had recovered so quickly, and Sarah noticed him making a phone call immediately after leaving the room. Over the next several days, Sarah documented a pattern of similar incidents throughout the special patients unit. Mysterious visitors claiming to be from various agencies, subtle medical sabotage, and patients who either died from complications or were transferred to other facilities without explanation. She also began to identify which staff members might be involved in the conspiracy. Lieutenant Commander Webb, who had briefed Sarah on her first day, seemed to have access to information that should have been classified. A civilian contractor named Michael Barnes, who claimed to work in medical equipment maintenance, spent an unusual amount of time around the special patients and had access to areas where he shouldn't have been allowed. Most troubling of all, Commander Chin appeared to be coordinating many of the suspicious activities. Sarah observed him meeting with unknown civilians, approving unusual medication orders, and signing transfer papers that removed patients from the facility with minimal documentation. Admiral Richardson, operating under his new identity as a civilian intelligence consultant, had been working with Torres to map the extent of Morrison's network. During one of their covert meetings, he shared disturbing intelligence about the scope of the operation. "The corruption goes much deeper than we initially realized," he told Sarah during a brief encounter in a hospital parking lot. Morrison has been recruiting people throughout the military medical system for over 5 years. They're not just selling weapons technology. They're eliminating anyone who might expose their activities. How many people are we talking about? Sarah asked. At least 24 confirmed deaths that we can directly link to the network, Richardson replied grimly. Probably many more that were made to look like accidents or natural causes. Sarah felt a chill as she realized she was working alongside people who had committed multiple murders. What about Colonel Martinez? Have you been able to identify what he discovered? He was a logistics officer involved in weapons shipments to Southeast Asia, Richardson explained. We think he noticed discrepancies in the inventory records that would have exposed the trafficking operation. Someone decided he needed to be silenced before he could report his findings. The breakthrough in the investigation came 2 weeks into Sarah's assignment. While working a night shift in the Special Patients Unit, she observed Commander Chun meeting with a woman she recognized from the hospital attack, the team leader who had escaped during the assault on Admiral Richardson. The woman, who introduced herself to the medical staff as Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, was apparently General Morrison's daughter. She had been using her position as a civilian consultant to coordinate the medical aspects of the assassination and cover-up operations. Sarah managed to activate a hidden recording device as Dr. Morrison and Commander Chin discussed their plans for Colonel Martinez and 2 other patients who were scheduled to be transferred the following day. The colonel has been more resilient than we expected, Dr. Morrison was saying. But the new protocol should ensure he doesn't survive the night. What about the other 2? Chin asked. Captain Williams needs to disappear completely. He was asking too many questions about the shipping manifests. Lieutenant Foster can have an accident during his surgery tomorrow. Sarah listened in horror as the 2 conspirators calmly planned the murder of 3 patients under their care. She knew she had to act immediately, but any direct intervention would blow her cover and potentially get her killed as well. Using her emergency communication protocol, Sarah sent an urgent signal to Torres's team. Within minutes, she received confirmation that a tactical response unit was being deployed to the medical center. But the conspirators were moving faster than expected. Sarah watched through security cameras as unknown personnel began preparing Colonel Martinez for an emergency transfer, claiming he needed specialized treatment that wasn't available at the facility. Sarah realized she had to make a choice. She could maintain her cover and hope that Torres's team arrived in time, or she could act directly to protect the patients under her care. The decision was surprisingly easy. Moving with the confidence and authority that her intensive training had given her, Sarah strode into Colonel Martinez's room and confronted the transfer team. "I'm sorry, but this patient is not cleared for transport," she said firmly, positioning herself between Martinez and the orderlies. "His condition is too unstable." One of the orderlies, a large man with military bearing, stepped toward her menacingly. "Ma'am, we have orders from the highest levels. This patient needs to be moved immediately." "Then, you'll need to go through me," Sarah replied, her hand moving toward the emergency alarm that would summon security to the room. The confrontation escalated quickly. The fake orderly reached for what appeared to be a weapon concealed under his scrubs, but Sarah was ready for him. Months of intensive training had transformed her from a frightened rookie nurse into someone capable of defending herself and her patients. The fight was brief, but intense. Sarah managed to disable the first attacker using techniques Torres's team had taught her, but more conspirators were arriving in the corridor outside. Just as the situation seemed hopeless, the distinctive sound of tactical gear and automatic weapons filled the medical center. Torres and his team had arrived in force, supported by Navy security and federal agents. The medical center was surrounded and secured within minutes, with dozens of arrests taking place throughout the facility. In the aftermath, as Sarah sat in a conference room giving her statement to federal investigators, she reflected on how completely her life had changed. 3 weeks ago, she had been a rookie nurse worried about making mistakes with medication dosages. Now she was a key witness in one of the largest military corruption cases in decades. General Morrison was arrested at his home outside Washington, D.C., along with 17 other military officers and dozens of civilian contractors. The weapons trafficking network was dismantled, preventing millions of dollars worth of classified technology from reaching hostile foreign governments. Colonel Martinez and The other patients Sarah had protected made full recoveries. Martinez later testified that he had indeed discovered evidence of the trafficking operation and had been targeted for elimination before he could report his findings. Admiral Richardson was officially resurrected and returned to active duty, where he led a comprehensive review of military security procedures designed to prevent similar corruption networks from developing in the future. As for Sarah, she was offered a permanent position with Torres's intelligence unit, along with a promotion and specialized training that would make her one of the most effective undercover operatives in military intelligence. Standing in her apartment overlooking San Diego Bay, wearing her Navy uniform with pride, Sarah Mitchell looked at the silver anchor pin that Admiral Richardson had given her. She thought about her grandmother's advice to always pay attention to people and situations, wisdom that had ultimately saved lives and protected national security. The woman who looked back at her from the mirror was confident, capable, and ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. She had discovered strengths she never knew she possessed, and had found a sense of purpose that made all the risks and sacrifices worthwhile. 3 weeks had transformed a rookie nurse into a naval intelligence officer. But, more importantly, it had revealed the courage and dedication that had been inside her all along, waiting for the right moment to emerge and make a difference in the world.